Hi, Talyn, it's Amy. I am very, very sorry that I didn't have time to look over your essay in class yesterday. So I wanted to go ahead and make you a video because I thought that would probably be the next best thing rather than me trying to type it all into an email. This way I can have your paper pulled up and you can see what I'm talking about. You did a really good job with your formatting. I know you're a pro at this, but the only thing I would say is that you need to put your last name here up in the header instead of just the word last. So Baker would go right there in front of the page number. Overall, you did a really good job introducing the article here. The only thing is that I would add a past tense verb like called or titled before the title of the article just to make it flow into your sentence a little bit better. And as far as your paraphrase of his thesis, you do a really good job summing up his overall central claim, but this isn't totally comprehensive of all of his points, so don't forget to include the point he makes about what's wrong with the education system today, because this is really just what he thinks is a good way to educate children. So his argument has two parts: what's wrong with the education system today and how he thinks it could be better, which is represented here, which is going back to the way things were in hunter-gatherer times. So something about, for hundreds of years children educated themselves by exploring, playing, and self-direction, and this was very much what he believes maybe schools should be like again today, because over the last several hundred years they have developed in a way to associate learning with work and not play. So something along those lines. You might even want to reverse the order of the points in the sentence to make it a little more logical. Overall, your thesis is really, really strong. And I wanted to say about the essay in general, the depth of thought here is by far the greatest that you've had over the course of the semester, and I can tell it's changed a lot through your revisions already. So I'm seeing some really cool stuff here in terms of your progress as a writer and as a thinker. So I'm really impressed, and great work with that. I do have a couple of suggestions though, even though this is a very successful thesis. The first one's just a wording issue. You say the writer's inability of having common ground. That's not usually how we refer to this verb having. We usually use a different preposition here, and I'm not even sure having is the right word. So when you say it down here, Gray doesn't have any ability to find common ground. That is definitely correct, and that's more what I'm looking for up here. So something like to find common ground, or you could say to establish common ground, to achieve common ground, to gain common ground, or something like that. I wouldn't use the verb have, and I wouldn't use the preposition of. I would say to and then a different verb. So that's just a suggestion. The only other suggestion I have for your thesis is to be a little more specific when you're previewing these last 2 points about logic and credibility. So you say here the evidence is logical and makes him trustworthy. But when I get down to those paragraphs in your essay, the logical paragraph, while it does include a point about evidence, it's also based on how the argument is structured. And a lot of what you're talking about in the paragraph itself is about structure. And then in the next paragraph, you talk about credibility, but most of it isn't necessarily based on evidence. A lot of it is based on his credentials and things that you have seen through your secondary research on who he is as a writer. So when we're going back to your thesis, I think you could be a little more direct in previewing those things. So you might say the structure and evidence, which is logical, and the author's expertise or the author's credentials, which make him trustworthy. Just to be a little more precise in terms of what makes him trustworthy in your thesis. You could include evidence there, but it's not just the evidence that makes him trustworthy, looking at what you've written in the actual paragraph. Okay. Overall, you have really strong topic sentences, so I'm not really going to have too many big picture comments for you here. A lot of it will be somewhat nitpicky. So for example here, Gray has no connection with his readers, only states his opinions about the hunter-gatherer times, and discusses historical examples of traditional aspects. Well, traditional aspects of what? And whenever you use the word aspects, you want to say aspects of what. So in this case, it would be aspects of education, or the way education is approached in the United States today. So I would just say traditional aspects of education, or something like that. And then going on to the next page, again, there's just a little preposition switch here. So whereas up here I wanted you to change of to to down here, you should probably change the word to in. Usually we say things result in something else, not result to something else. This is all really very thoughtful and a very high level of deep thinking. I also really like how you connect to your audience in this sentence and really reach out to her and really push things up against her point of view as one of the readers. However, you do say here that I feel you and the author would connect to a certain degree, but the paragraph is supposed to be about the fact that he can't find common ground. So it almost feels like you're contradicting yourself a little bit here, even though this is a really good thought. And in general, I want to see you focus at the end of this paragraph on that idea that he can't find common ground. So you're talking about the fact that he wants people to feel angry along with him. Gray wants people to be angry, but go back to what you said at the beginning, which is that he doesn't really seek out their values. So that's what I want you to connect back to here as you're talking about the fact that he wants people to feel angry. How does that cause kind of a disconnect between what he's saying in the article and the values of the audience? So that's kind of what I'm saying here. And just in general at the end of the paragraph, focus these interpretations on the point you're trying to make in this paragraph, and then you can even restate that point at the end of the paragraph to wrap things up. This was a really strong paragraph. Again, in the thesis, you say just the evidence makes it logical, whereas in this paragraph, you talk about structure and evidence making it logical. So I would just go back to the thesis and allude to that a little more strongly, add the word structure in there. But then the other thing you could do if you wanted to make this paragraph longer, because I noticed you're a little bit shy of the 3-page minimum, you could add some examples of the evidence that makes his logic stronger, some facts and things like that, because really the facts that you're presenting here are mostly related to his structure. So his chronological pattern of evidence, going through historical events, and then puts his thesis at the end and has a strong message. All of that is structure stuff. So you could add some examples in here of the facts that kind of lay that foundation. If you were thinking about the pyramid of boxes I always draw for the hierarchy of argument, the evidence is all the way across the bottom. It's the most numerous component. You're going to have way more pieces of evidence than you are reasons, and of course you just have one thesis. So evidence kind of forms the whole foundation of the argument. Well, can you talk about how the evidence forms the foundation for his discussion and how it makes it more logical? So that would make this paragraph a little bit longer. And then I also thought when you were recapping this point at the end, you do a good job restating your overall evaluation, but I'd like to see you address that point about logic just one more time to wrap up, to connect back to the main idea of this paragraph. So something like, due to his use of evidence and the logical structure of the argument. You could just add that right here at the end of this paragraph. Okay. Next paragraph was strong also, but as I stated before, your points about credibility here are mainly based on his credentials. And so where in the thesis in the introduction you say his credibility is based on his use of good evidence, here you're not really focusing just on evidence. You're talking about some other things that make him credible. So I would maybe mention those credentials or his expertise or something in your thesis just to preview this a little more directly. And then again, this is another short paragraph that I think could be more fully developed if you're trying to beef up the essay and make it a little bit longer. So give me some more of his credentials. You talk about the fact that he's a PhD, he has a background in education and legit research, but what else do you know about him that would make him a credible source to you? And then within, or in terms of the evidence itself that makes him trustworthy, this is a good point that you can actually follow his links, but I'd like to see a couple more examples of that here, again, and that would make the paragraph longer. After that, you kind of go into a point about his bias and tone. That kind of contradicts, first of all, the fact that you said this was a strength, and it's actually a completely different point than the point that you're previewing in this topic sentence. So what I would say is if you're going to say something about his bias, his tone, and that kind of thing, either give it its own paragraph, fully develop it with examples from the article, and add it to your thesis at the beginning or the end, excuse me, or don't include it at all. You know, an easy fix here would just be to cut this out altogether. But if you are trying to really add a lot of length, this would be one area that you could add a totally separate kind of fourth point that would be another weakness. But you would probably want to downplay it a little bit just so that it doesn't undermine your overall evaluation of the article as successful. So if you are going to do that, you might say something like, at times I did question his credibility because he has such a sarcastic tone. However, this does not undermine the credibility that he established through his expertise and through his strong sources. So again, either put this in its own paragraph or don't include it here at all. That's basically what I'm saying here. And then just another little nitpicky thing, take out the words I wrote here. You didn't write the article, you just read it. And you don't even really need to say this because you say his article earlier in the sentence, so it's pretty clear what you're talking about. And in general, in this paragraph, you need to connect back to what you previewed in your topic sentence just to wrap up the paragraph. You always want to restate your point at the end of the paragraph just like you previewed it in your topic sentence. And then as far as your conclusion goes, I had similar comments to what we saw in the introduction and your statement of the thesis there. So again, to achieve common ground, to find common ground, to obtain, to earn, or whatever, but not of having. That's just a little bit awkward. I also wanted to see you rework this. Of course, it'll have to be in light of how you change the thesis at the beginning. If you're going to, for example, say structure and evidence, which makes it logical, and his expertise and strong sources, which also make him credible. Right now you have trust first and logic second, and that is the reverse order of how they appear in the body of the essay. So you just want to make sure to switch them here so that you really are following along with your paragraphs. And if you did end up adding a fourth point about the questionable credibility based on his bias and tone, you would have to add that as your fourth point in the thesis as well. And then you do say you would have an interest in reading this. I think it would be interesting for you, but you never actually have that call to action where you tell her to go read it. Come right out and say that. I would just add that to that sentence at the end there. And then don't forget your works cited, because I'm not going to let you all redo them this time. That was a one-time thing for the compare contrast, since that was the first essay that I required a works cited. It was more of an honest mistake, and now you kind of have to start being meticulous in remembering to include that in your essays from now on. So let me know if you have further questions. I hope this was somewhat helpful, and if you do have other questions or you want to revise this again, just send it back to me and I can make you another video if I have to, if that's an easier way for you to understand what I'm trying to say than an email would be. So, all right, have a great weekend. Have a good Halloween. I hope you girls have fun, and let me know if you have further questions. Thank you.